What happens when a beloved country music icon walks onto a talk show set expecting a friendly chat about her new album, only to find herself face-to-face with a host determined to drag her into political controversy? What you're about to witness is one of the most jaw-dropping moments in daytime television history, where Joy Behar thought she could steamroll over Reba McEntire, but instead got served a reality check that left her speechless and the audience gasping. This is the story of how one of country music's most respected voices turned the tables on a host who clearly underestimated her guest. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment below because you're going to want to discuss this absolute train wreck after you see what happens. The morning started like any other at the View Studios. Reba McEntire had arrived early, her trademark red hair perfectly styled, wearing an elegant navy blazer that commanded respect. She'd been invited on the show to discuss her upcoming tour and new music, something she'd done dozens of times on various programs throughout her decades-long career. But as she sat in the green chair adjusting her microphone, she had no idea that Joy Behar had other plans entirely. "We're back in a few seconds," called out the floor manager as the crew bustled around the set. Reba smiled warmly at the other hosts, Whoopi Goldberg giving her an encouraging nod. She'd always enjoyed appearing on The View, finding the conversation lively and the audience welcoming. Today felt different, though. There was a tension in the air she couldn't quite place. "And we're live," the floor manager signaled as the familiar theme music faded out. "Welcome back to The View," Joy announced with her characteristic sharp smile. "We're here with country music legend Reba McEntire, who's got a new tour coming up." But before we talk about music, Reba, I think our audience would love to know where you stand on some of the issues that really matter to working families across America. Reba's smile faltered slightly. This wasn't the direction she'd expected the conversation to take. "Well, Joy, I'm really here to talk about my music and connect with the fans who've supported me all these years." "Oh, come on now," Joy pressed, leaning forward with that look viewers knew meant trouble. "You've got a platform. You've got influence. Surely you have opinions about what's happening in our country. I mean, your fan base is largely conservative. Rural America, right? The same people who've been voting against their own interests for years." The audience shifted uncomfortably. Even Whoopi raised an eyebrow at Joy's aggressive opening. Reba straightened slightly, reading the room and sensing the tone turning hostile. "Joy, I think you might be making some assumptions about my fans that aren't fair," Reba replied calmly. "My audience is made up of all kinds of people from all walks of life. They're teachers, nurses, farmers, business owners, military families. They're good people who work hard and love their families." "That's a nice deflection," Joy shot back, unsatisfied. "But we both know that country music has a problem with diversity and inclusion. Your genre has historically excluded voices of color, and even now, the industry struggles with representation. Don't you think you have a responsibility to use your platform to call out these systemic issues?" Reba's eyes flashed, revealing the steel beneath the Southern charm. "Joy, I think you need to do your homework before you start making accusations. Country music has always been influenced by blues, gospel, and folk traditions from all communities. Artists like Charlie Pride, Darius Rucker, Mickey Guyton, Kane Brown, these aren't tokens. They're talented artists who've earned their place." "But historically," Joy pushed, ignoring the warning signs, "the country music establishment has been exclusionary, and frankly, your silence on social justice issues speaks volumes. When Black Lives Matter was at its peak, where was Reba McEntire's voice?" The temperature in the studio seemed to drop instantly. Reba leaned forward, her voice still controlled but carrying an edge that made everyone pay attention. "My silence, Joy? You clearly haven't been paying attention to my career or my actions. I've spent decades supporting charitable causes, building programs for underprivileged youth, and using my platform to help people regardless of their background. But I don't feel the need to announce every good deed on social media for political points." Joy's face tightened, realizing her usual tactics weren't working. "Well, it's convenient that you can hide behind charity work instead of taking real political stands. Your fans deserve to know where you stand on the issues that affect their daily lives. And what makes you think they don't know? Reba's voice grew stronger, her Oklahoma roots slipping through. You're sitting here telling me what my fans think, what they believe, what they deserve. But when's the last time you actually talked to any of them? When's the last time you visited a small town in America, sat down with families who are struggling, and actually listened instead of lecturing? The other hosts exchanged glances. This was not going according to Joy's plan. Whoopi cleared her throat, sensing the need to intervene, but Joy was too far into her attack to back down now. I don't need to visit small-town America to understand that your fan base consistently votes for politicians who undermine women's rights, environmental protection, and social progress, Joy declared, her voice rising. And your refusal to condemn those choices makes you complicit in perpetuating harmful systems. That was the moment everything shifted. Reba's entire demeanor changed. The sweet country singer the audience expected vanished, replaced by a woman who had built an empire through grit and wasn't about to let anyone tear down her life's work or insult the people who supported her. Reba set down her coffee cup with deliberate precision. The small clink against the table cut through the tension like a knife. When she looked back up at Joy, something in her eyes made the entire studio hold its breath. This wasn't the polite guest from earlier. This was a woman who had survived decades in the entertainment industry by knowing exactly when to stand her ground. Joy, let me tell you something about complicity, Reba began, her voice calm but weighted with barely contained fury. Complicity is sitting in your comfortable studio in New York City, making six figures to judge people you've never met, while pretending you speak for working families. Complicity is assuming that anyone who doesn't share your exact political views is automatically stupid or evil. Joy opened her mouth to interrupt, but Reba raised a hand, commanding silence. No, you've had your say. Now it's my turn. You want to talk about my fans? Let me tell you about Sarah from Tennessee, a single mother working 3 jobs who saved for months to bring her daughter to my concert because music helps them forget their troubles for a few hours. Or maybe we should talk about Frank from Iowa, a veteran dealing with PTSD who finds peace in songs that remind him of home. These are real people with real struggles, not the cartoon villains you've painted them to be. The audience was silent now, some leaning forward in their seats. Even the camera operators seemed frozen, afraid to miss a moment of the unfolding showdown. Joy tried to regain control, her voice noticeably shaky. Look, I'm not attacking your fans personally, but we can't ignore the broader political implications. Reba's voice cut through her like a blade. You mean the implications of a coastal elite telling Middle America what they should think and feel? The implications of dismissing entire communities because they don't vote the way you want them to? Whoopi tried again to step in. Ladies, maybe we should— No, Whoopi, let her finish, Joy said, though her bravado was cracking. I want to hear how Reba justifies staying silent while her platform could be used to educate people on important social issues. Reba laughed, a sharp, cold sound. Educate people? Joy, you're assuming that anyone who doesn't echo your talking points needs to be educated. That's not education. That's indoctrination. And frankly, it's insulting to millions of Americans who are perfectly capable of thinking for themselves. But some issues are black and white, Joy insisted, sweat visible on her forehead. Human rights, equality, basic decency. These aren't political opinions, they're moral imperatives. You're absolutely right. Reba agreed. And for a moment, Joy looked relieved. They are moral imperatives, which is why I find it troubling that you think you have a monopoly on morality. Reba leaned in. Let me ask you something, Joy. When's the last time you visited a food bank in rural America? When's the last time you volunteered at a homeless shelter outside of Manhattan? When's the last time you rolled up your sleeves and actually helped the communities you claim to care so much about? Joy's face turned a deeper shade of red. I support numerous charities and causes. Writing checks from your penthouse is not the same as understanding people's lives, Reba interrupted sharply. You sit here every day pontificating about what's wrong with America. But you've isolated yourself in a bubble of people who think exactly like you. How can you possibly understand what working families need when you haven't lived their reality in decades? The other hosts were visibly uncomfortable now. This had gone far beyond a typical heated discussion. This was personal. I resent the implication that I'm out of touch, Joy snapped, her composure finally cracking completely. I grew up working class. I understand struggle. Did you? Reba's question hung in the air like a challenge. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've forgotten where you came from. You've traded your authenticity for applause lines and your compassion for cheap political points. That woman who grew up working class would be ashamed of what you've become. The studio was so quiet, you could hear the air conditioning humming. Joy's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, searching for a comeback that wouldn't come. You want to talk about using platforms responsibly? Reba continued, her voice gaining momentum. Then let's talk about how you use yours. Every day you come on this show and spread division, painting half the country as enemies instead of fellow Americans with different perspectives. You've turned political discourse into a blood sport, and then you have the audacity to lecture others about unity and understanding. That's not, Joy stammered, completely off balance. We discuss important issues here. We hold people accountable. No, Joy, you don't hold people accountable. You attack them. There's a difference. Reba's words were surgical in their precision. Accountability requires good faith engagement with different viewpoints. What you do is character assassination dressed up as social justice. You've weaponized moral outrage to silence anyone who doesn't conform to your worldview. Joy looked around desperately, seeking support from her co-hosts, but found only uncomfortable silence. Even her usual allies seemed stunned by the thoroughness of Reba's dismantling. I think we're getting off track here, Joy cried weakly. This was supposed to be about your music. Oh no, Reba said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. You opened this door, Joy. You decided that instead of talking about music, you wanted a political confrontation. You assumed that because I'm from Oklahoma and sing country music, I'd be an easy target for your usual routine. But here's the thing about assumptions. They make you look foolish when you're wrong. The audience was starting to murmur, some nodding in agreement with Reba's points. Joy could feel the room slipping away from her, the control she'd wielded for years evaporating right in front of her. You're twisting my words, Joy said desperately. I never said you were an easy target. Didn't you? Reba leaned back in her chair, fully in command now. From the moment this segment started, you've talked down to me, made assumptions about my fans, questioned my values, and demanded I justify my existence to your satisfaction. If that's not treating someone like an easy target, then I don't know what is. Joy's hands were visibly shaking as she reached for her water glass, her carefully constructed facade crumbling. The woman who'd built a career on cutting down guests with sharp wit and political righteousness was suddenly learning what it felt like to be on the receiving end of a truly devastating takedown. You know what the real tragedy is here, Joy? Reba continued, her voice shifting from anger to disappointment. You had an opportunity today to have a genuine conversation with someone who's spent decades connecting with people across this country. Instead, you chose to turn it into an ambush because you thought it would make good television. I wasn't ambushing anyone, Joy protested weakly, the conviction gone. I was asking legitimate questions about important issues. No, you weren't asking questions, Reba corrected calmly. You were making statements disguised as questions. There's a difference between what are your thoughts on social issues and how do you justify entertaining people whose values are backwards. One invites dialogue. The other is an accusation wearing a question mark. The co-hosts sat in stunned silence, watching their colleague get systematically dismantled by someone they had clearly underestimated. The audience was hanging on every word. But surely, Joy tried again, one more desperate attempt to regain footing. You can understand why people might want to know where celebrities stand on important issues. Of course I can understand that, Reba replied, her tone almost pitying. But there's a respectful way to explore those topics. And then there's what you did today. You assumed the worst about me and my fans from the very first question. You didn't want to understand my perspective. You wanted to expose what you believed were my flaws. Joy's face was a mottled red, her breathing shallow. That's not true. I respect diverse viewpoints. Reba let out a soft, cutting laugh. Joy, in the time we've been talking, you've called my fans backwards, accused me of being complicit in harmful systems, suggested my industry is racist, and questioned my moral character. If that's your idea of respecting diverse viewpoints, I'd hate to see what disrespect looks like. The studio audience was no longer silent. Quiet murmurs of agreement were spreading, and Joy could feel the room turning decisively against her. You're putting words in my mouth, Joy said, her voice cracking. I never called your fans backwards, didn't you? Reba pulled out her phone and glanced at it as if reading. I believe your exact words were that they vote against their own interests and support backwards values. Would you like me to ask the producers to roll back the footage? Joy's eyes went wide with panic. She'd been so focused on her attack that she hadn't realized how damning her own words sounded when thrown back at her. I was speaking generally about voting patterns, Joy stammered, not making personal attacks. Joy, stop! Reba's voice was firm, but not unkind. Just stop. You're embarrassing yourself now. Own what you said instead of trying to walk it back. At least have the courage of your convictions. The silence that followed was deafening. Joy sat frozen, her mouth slightly open, completely out of ammunition and ideas. For perhaps the first time in her television career, she was utterly speechless. You know what I think happened here today? Reba said, filling the silence with a voice that commanded the entire studio's attention. I think you've been in your bubble so long that you forgot there are intelligent, thoughtful people who might see the world differently than you do. You've surrounded yourself with people who applaud every political talking point you make, and it's made you lazy in your thinking. Joy tried to respond, but only managed a weak, I don't think that's fair. Fair? Reba's eyebrows rose. Joy, you've spent this entire interview being unfair. You've been condescending, presumptuous, and frankly quite rude. I came here as your guest, and you've treated me like a defendant in some moral courtroom where you've appointed yourself judge and jury. Whoopi finally found her voice, though it was strained. No, Reba said firmly, holding up her hand. I think the audience deserves to see how this ends. Joy started something here, and she should see it through to its conclusion. Joy looked around desperately, seeking an escape route, but there was none. The cameras were still rolling. The audience was watching intently, and her co-hosts offered no help. I just want people to think critically about the issues that affect their lives, Joy said weakly, grasping at anything to save herself. And there it is, Reba replied with a sad smile. You want people to think critically, as long as they reach the same conclusions you have. That's not critical thinking, Joy. That's indoctrination. Critical thinking means being open to the possibility that reasonable people can examine the same information and reach different conclusions. Joy's head dropped. The fight had completely drained out of her. She looked deflated, all the air and arrogance gone. Here's what I want people to understand, Reba continued, her voice taking on the warm, caring tone that made her beloved by millions. We don't have to agree on everything to treat each other with respect. We don't have to share the same political views to recognize each other's humanity. But what we saw here today, this assumption that anyone who thinks differently must be evil or stupid, that's what's truly destroying our country, The studio audience began to applaud, slowly at first, then building into a sustained ovation. Joy sat motionless, staring down at her hands, completely humiliated and defeated. "I came here to talk about music," Reba said as the applause died down. "Because music brings people together. It crosses political lines, economic boundaries, and cultural divides. Maybe if we had more of that kind of thinking, and less of what we witnessed today, we'd all be better off." Joy finally looked up, her eyes glassy with unshed tears of embarrassment and fury. She opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it again, realizing that anything she said would only make everything worse. The cameras captured every second of her humiliation. The woman who'd built a career out of embarrassing others was now experiencing the other side of that equation in the most public way imaginable. As the segment finally came to an end, viewers were left with an image they wouldn't forget. Joy Behar sitting in stunned silence while Reba McEntire delivered one of the most devastating and articulate takedowns in daytime television history. That's exactly what happened when Joy Behar thought she could intimidate and lecture a true American icon. What the audience witnessed was a masterclass in standing up to a bully with grace, intelligence, and unshakable dignity. Reba didn't just win the confrontation, she exposed the hollow nature of Joy's entire approach to political discourse. Make sure to subscribe for more incredible moments like this. And tell me in the comments, who came out looking worse in this exchange? Joy for her obvious bias and condescension, or the producers for allowing it to unfold in the first place?